All right. Hey, welcome in again to the Sixth Floor Podcast. It's a podcast about everything where we draft the 80s. I'm Yap. There's Sags in the upper left. There's Breeze in the lower left and Johnson in the lower right. This week, taking a little twist, we're going to draft. We're drafting professional wrestlers of the 1980s. Now, we grew up watching wrestling, right? I mean, the Georgia Championship Wrestling, the Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, WWF at the time, Superstars and stuff like that. And we grew up, we talked about it all the time. So we're going to draft wrestlers. Now, I know, Sags, you're big into it. Johnson is still big into it. Breeze, I'm not sure about you. Is this kind of out of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse.
All right, we'll let you go then.
No,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, one of the earlier topics we did where it was a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but since we're focusing on the 80s, I do have some awareness of who these guys are. When I was looking back through some of these guys, there was a lot more names that I recognized than I thought I was going to originally. So I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, so the draft order today is Johnson, you're going first. I'm second, Breeze is third, and Sags is last. But he'll get the wraparound pick in the snake draft. So, with that being said, Johnson, you are on the clock for the wrestling.
I'm on the clock.
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, the three of us, not only are we big wrestling fans, I feel like we like a lot of the same things about wrestling and a lot of the same wrestlers. So I'm going to be interested to see how this kind of plays out. When we're talking 80s wrestlers, there's a lot to choose from. There's only a couple of guys, though, in the history of this sport that have transcended the industry and have become cultural icons. The guy I'm going with maybe took him a little longer to get there, but you look at how popular he is, especially in the hip-hop community now. I mean, Ric Flair is the man for a reason, and I feel like he has got to be the number one pick.
I thought you were going with Bad News Brown.
I mean, even if you just stick to just wrestling, I mean, doesn't matter what company, you see somebody chop somebody in the ring, what do you hear out of the crowd?
Yeah.
He's great on the mic. I mean, he's iconic. He gets a lot of attention nowadays, like for his catchphrases and his promos. But man, in the 80s, man, that guy could go in the ring. I mean, you look at his series of matches against like Ricky Steamboat, Terry Funk, Great Muta, Nikita Koloff. I mean, he was a guy in the territorial system that, I mean, when he had the belt, he would come into town, wrestle the local hero for 35 minutes, make him look like a superstar, and then win and walk out with the belt. I mean, he's iconic. We could have a whole podcast just about Ric Flair. I know Yap, especially. I know you're a huge fan as well. He's kind of the guy that like solidified me being a wrestling fan too. When you talk about his involvement with Four Horsemen, which was also a huge, huge part of the 80s. But I feel like if we open this up to all decades, Ric Flair would still be my number one pick. And for just the 80s, I'm definitely happy to go with the man. Because to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Can I push back a little?
You can.
I mean, it's a podcast, right? So
yeah,
I agree with everything you said. The couple things that stick to me is like I don't know when it turned because I did stop watching wrestling for a while and then kind of got back into it. But like he became like a caricature of himself, like later on.
When he got really old, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like even the strut became like an over strutting, and I know that sounds silly because it's all wrestling. Like I get it, but
yeah,
and it was like, but it's not that it was cool in the 80s. It's like he did it cooler in the 80s. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100% with that.
And I'll admit the 30 for 30, like it left a little bit of a taste in my mouth, to be honest with you. Like I always thought it was a character to some extent. Like I know that there's always some, of the person in the character and the character in the person, but he was pretty much that guy. And
Yeah.
I realized that I was like, oh, like, like he did go with all those women and do all those things. And it was like, it's a little, but again, I'm not saying it's a bad pick.
Not going to win too many Father of the Year awards.
Right.
And
But a great
part
pick.
of that was his personality. Part of that was the business. I mean, when you're on the road, 350 days out of the year, you're doing what he did. I mean, he worked a lot tougher schedule than, that other iconic guy from that other company up north that I'm sure will be brought up soon. So.
No, I agree. Again, it's a good pick. Those were just some of mine.
Yeah, and you're dead on both of them.
And if you see or hear other wrestlers in that era talk about Ric Flair and talk about that lifestyle that he had, and they say, well, is that just a persona? No, all the Four Horsemen lived that lifestyle. I mean, they took the limousines, they took the Lear jets, they were wearing custom-made Armani suits and the alligator shoes. I mean, that's the way it was for them. They were their characters. And I think that's what made people both love them and hate them at the same time. But Ric Flair was great. Two of my favorite Ric Flairs is when he gets punched on a while, then takes a step back and falls flat on his face. And
best flop in the business.
The other is when he starts dropping elbows on his suit coat. I mean, come on, you can't beat that, can you? And the knee drop.
If you want to have some fun, and we definitely won't play it here, Phil, y'all won't play it, but just go look up like Ric Flair promos, not even from the 90s. Like do strictly 80s.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. You thought The Rock was good?
Oh yeah.
Man. Yeah. The Rock is good, but Flair was unbelievable, man. So good, so funny, so serious. Like it was definitely a number one pick.
There were some other guys.
Speaking of that, before we move on real quick, I just thought, I had some notes on this piece of paper. This piece of paper costs more than your all's house. That's one of my favorites. Of course, he's talking about his shoes, but I can't point out how much shoes right now.
All right. Well, you mentioned one of the guys that was going to be my pick, the Great Muta. And no, I'm kidding. I'm not picking the Great Muta number 2. But you did mention one of the guys that I'm picking at number 2. Now, I mean, you could go a multitude of ways here. There are so many guys that you could take after Ric Flair, and so many guys that worked the microphone great. I mean, I think of Dusty Rhodes, who was just phenomenal. He was the best guy to cut a promo in the world. He could talk you into a building. There's Hulk Hogan. I'm going to stay away from that pick because I was more of a mid-Atlantic, Southern World Championship wrestling guy.
In the 80s especially, me too.
Yeah. Superstation TBS, Saturday night at 6:05. Where were you? You were sitting down. You were watching Georgia Championship Wrestling with Tony Schiavone and David Crockett and those. Jim Ross was on there at times. So the guy that I'm going to pick, and you may say, I get that, or really that high. I'm going to pick a guy that I absolutely hated when he was on, because I was a face guy. I wasn't a heel guy when I was a kid. And this guy was he was hated by everybody because he wasn't from this country. I'm going to go with Nikita Koloff as my first pick in this draft because for a number of reasons. Like I said, I hated him growing up because he was a Russian and we were Americans and he was the bad guy. And he put a Russian sickle on David Crockett. Poor David Crockett. I wasn't a fan of his, but he didn't deserve that. And just, okay, so I hated him because he was Russian. And then you grow up and you realize he's not even from Russia. I don't know if you guys were aware of that.
What?
He's not. No.
What?
Spoiler alert.
I know. I've actually met the guy a couple of times and talked with him. He was in the studio with us a couple of times. And he's just such a super nice guy right now. And to see that he goes into this character, he dives full into the character, learning some Russian lingo. And, when he's leaving the building, I mean, he was that guy. And Shatowata Magatiye. But, later on you see him, he turns to a good guy and he teams up with Dusty Rhodes after Magnum Ta wrecked his car. And then he teams up with
Crockett
the Road
Cup.
Warriors, the Crockett Cup, absolutely. And, you know, I know he's turned his life around. He's a minister now. And just a funny story about Nikita Koloff. So he was in Huntington years and years ago. And I was like the ring announcer for this event. So it was really cool. Got to meet him and talk with him. But he sold his merchandise. I bought a book. I bought a T-shirt. And my brother was a huge, huge Nikita Koloff fan back in the day. So I thought, I'll get this shirt and, you know, maybe give it to him. Well, a couple years later, I still hadn't given it to him. But Nikita had come to Ashland, Kentucky, and he was going to be there as an appearance kind of a thing. So I took the shirt and I said, I'm just going to have him sign it. Because I got word that I could get backstage and meet him before the show. So I took my oldest son over, Dawson. And we got there, and Dawson had the shirt. And so Nikita gets a picture with him. And I'm like, man, it's great to see you again, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, hey, you want me to sign that shirt? I'm like, oh, absolutely. I want you to sign this shirt. This is for my brother. So he takes the shirt from Dawson, and he looks at him. He says, how do you spell your name, son? And Dawson says, Dawson. So he actually signed it to Dawson, Nikita Koloff. And I went, no, that was for my brother. So I told my brother about it, and I said, sorry. I mean, you can still have the shirt if you want, but it doesn't have your name on it.
You just got to change your
closet.
name.
Yeah, it's in Dawson's closet. So with the second pick, I'm going to take the Russian Nightmare. How you say, Nikita Koloff. By the way, I invited him to join this chat, and I don't know that he's going to. But
Good pick.
Yeah, that Crockett Cup moment, because we didn't know who Dusty's partner was going to be. When Nikita came out, we were like, what? You know, and you talked about hate. I mean, you know, we're supposed to hate him, you know, as young kids. But not only did we hate him, the guy was like legit scary, too. I mean, when he debuted, you're like, oh, my gosh, who is this guy? He looked like a monster, you know.
So there you go, Nikita Koloff. So that
I
puts
like
Breeze on. You don't like him?
No, I love the pick, man.
Oh, okay.
Love it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Breeze, you're up.
All right. So, like I said at the beginning, wrestling wasn't in my wheelhouse like it is for you three guys. But I did watch a little bit of it during the 80s period. I just couldn't really get hooked into it over a longer period of time. So for me, when I was going through the list, I wanted to focus on people who had maybe kind of crossed over into the larger culture, people who not only were good in wrestling, obviously, and popular and were, you know, good hype men and stuff, but people who maybe got into commercials and movies and other things where they became known outside of wrestling. So that's kind of where my focus is. So with that being said, my first pick is going to be Jessie the Body Ventura. He was a guy that I remember back from that time. And holding to my metric here, you know, he obviously became governor of Minnesota and got involved in politics and became well-known political kind of spokesperson for a while. And then obviously he was in one of my guilty pleasure action movies of all time, Predator. He was
awesome in Predator, man.
He was.
So
I ain't got time to bleed.
Yeah. He had all the best one-liners in that movie, I think, just about. So that's my first pick.
That's a good one.
That's
I always
solid.
liked when he was on Saturday Night's Main Event or whatever show he was on, wearing that big feather boa. I told you, McMahon.
He said, I was just going to mention that every title defense that, you know, you didn't have pay-per-view back then, but every title defense that Hogan had, Jessie would pick the other guy, whoever it was, King Kong Bundy. It doesn't matter. Every single time, and every single time he was wrong, and one time he was right, and he made it sound like he nailed it. Like, I told you, McMahon. I told you he wins. It's like, what are you talking about? You say it every week. So yeah, Jessie was great. He was great. Maybe a better announcer than I mean, he's a great wrestler, but maybe a better announcer.
I think his in-ring career got cut short with injuries, so he made a very smooth transition to announcing and was was iconic at that.
And he had to have the absolute worst wrestling action figure ever. If you remember those big rubber, whatever they were, his was this. Okay, you can't do anything with this. If you're wrestling, I mean, you could close. That's all you had. There's nothing you could do with it.
Yeah.
All right, so I get 2 picks. My first pick is goes along the lines of Nikita, actually. This guy was just really great. Good on the mic. Well, it was probably about a 7 out of 10 on the mic, but he was good enough. Really good in the ring, solid wrestler. Former United States heavyweight champion. Just battled Nikita constantly. And for me, it was always just fun to watch. And I'm going to go with Magnum Ta. Unfortunately, career cut woefully short in a terrible car accident.
Yeah.
And one of the craziest things, I think Philya and I were watching it at the same time. I was at his house, I think. And Magnum had just come back from this huge, long recovery. And he was still in a cane and and this was a real car accident. This was not a shoot. So he almost died. And he fights his way back and he's at the ring and Jimmy Garvin attacks him. And Dusty comes out and just starts swinging a baseball bat to protect. It was insanity because back then it was when you're 10 or 12, it's is it real? You knew it's kind of fake, but Dusty was just swinging a baseball bat. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
It was insanity. So Magnum Ta, great. Just loved watching him. I just thought he was really, really fun to watch. So
the 2 things about Magnum Ta is number one, his matches were 5 seconds long. He would throw somebody off the ropes, belly to belly, 1, 2, 3. That's it. He did that to Kamala of all people.
I know.
And he wasn't great on the mic.
I said a 7.
I know. But that was the only bad thing. He had the looks, he had the charisma, he could work well in the ring, but he just didn't have the mic skills that really put him in that upper echelon. He wrestled Nikita. Remember the best of 7 series he had with Nikita Koloff? I mean, that was
great.
The Russian Chainman, the I Quit match he had with Tully Blanchard. That match actually
greatest match ever.
It scared me. I'm like, stop.
He broke a wooden chair and stuck a portion of it. He didn't stick it in his eye, but it's he stuck it in Tully's eye.
Yeah.
And he grabbed the mic and he said, "Say it, say it." Oh, great matches.
Great matches. Now obviously it wasn't quite as intense as that match, but my first ever in-person wrestling event when I was 8 years old in Cambridge, Maryland. Main event was Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes in a steel cage. And then the next match was Magnum and Tully Blanchard in an I Quit match. So I got to see a Magnum Tully I Quit match in person when I was 8. So not too bad matches to headline a card for your first ever wrestling.
No
match.
kidding.
Yeah, looking back, it's funny that WWF, WWE had all the lights and the show, right? But there was something about looking back, especially about I don't want to call it grittiness. That's too cliche, I guess. But just it was almost like WCW, NWA seemed more real, Just, again, it was in this little studio where it was the ring and 6 feet over was the interview station. It's that's all there was.
Yeah.
And
Vince McMahon, once, especially you got to that first WrestleMania, he started putting so much emphasis on the entertainment aspect of the business. And, he's never really shied away from that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think even for a stretch, though, again, NWA, WCW, they had the best, the Great American Bash that just went all summer. And if you were around the time, again, we were 10, 11, 12-ish, Starrcade at, Thanksgiving that was it. That was the thing. That was Super Bowl type stuff. And I'm not over exaggerating that. I don't think that was legit. So that was really good, fun storyline wrestling, Flair, he would hold the title for literal years.
Yeah.
And now it's everybody's a title holder now. It's just, to me, it loses a lot of its luster, I guess. So,
Yeah.
So my next pick, going to the WWE, of course, he wrestled in WCW as well, but best line, I hear it. I used to say it every time at work when we would turn the music off at night. And of course, nobody knew what it meant, but I would say, cut the music. And, you know, in ode to Mr. Rick Rude, I actually got to meet him at Nike one time. He was on vacation with his family. He had no interest in talking to me at all. So he was at the register and his family was checking out, and I just went up to him, you know, and I said, "Hey man, really big fan." He goes, "I appreciate it." And I was like, okay, this dude does not want to talk to me, so I'm just gonna let him be. But he was just, you know, the tie-dye tights with the lips on it, and he would invite females to kiss him in the ring, and just a whole shtick. And from the stories that you hear, like a legitimate bad dude, like could legitimately fight. Not that makes him a better wrestler or whatever, but just the stories that went along with him. So I was a big, huge Rick Rude fan, because you can just say, you know, just calling all the men ugly and just all of his cliche things, and just really funny, good stuff. So I'll go with Mr. Rick Rude. May he rest in peace.
That don't surprise me at all, because I know he was always one of your guys when we sat around talking about wrestling in our Olderby days. So I was kind of anticipating Rick Rude coming from you.
I remember when you met him and we talked. I don't remember when you called or something. You're like, "Man, guess who I just met in the store?" I'm like, "I don't know, Rick Rude." I'm like, "Shut up."
He said, "No, you didn't." No, I swear, I had the mustache and everything. That's how I noticed him.
That's awesome. All right, Breeze, you're up.
All right, I have a question for you guys before I make my pick. When I was going through the list of these 80s wrestlers, it seemed to me like all the names that I remember hearing from that time, it seemed to me like most of them I felt like were kind of the bad guys. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll have some time to mention some of these other guys that we don't pick. But you tell me, what does it feel like? Does it feel like there's more kind of heel guys than face guys? I mean, I don't know how, like when you guys ranked your wrestlers, did you like the heel more or the face more, generally speaking?
It seemed like there were more heels.
Yeah.
You had your core group of faces that were, I mean, you're going to see them on TV every week to get the ratings, but somebody had to beat them up. So you had, and you can't just have, the same storyline for years playing out. Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, that was a great rivalry. And it went on for a while, but at the same time, the Midnight Express moved on to the Road Warriors, and the Rock and Roll Express split up to go their different ways. That didn't necessarily split up, but you had Ricky Morton with a lot of singles matches.
Yeah.
But it did seem like there were a lot more heels than there were baby faces.
Yeah, that was my impression when I was going through here. So with my second pick, keeping with my thing about cultural impact, and I also like guys who are really seem to be drawn to the people who are really good on the mic. And so with my second pick, this is another guy that I felt like was really strong on the mic, and then also had that crossover appeal that became kind of bigger in the culture. I wanted to do his voice, but I was going to mess it up too bad, so I'll just say Randy Macho Man Savage.
Come on, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Come on, we got like 18 people watching this thing. Come on.
Yeah,
Or not.
Randy Macho Man.
It's pretty good.
That's not bad. It's not bad at all.
It kind of sounded like a drunk Kermit the Frog.
Well, hey. But reason before you explain a little bit more though, but Savage is a guy that kind of met both worlds. I mean, what made him, one of the many things made him so good was he could be heel or baby face, like depending on what the storyline was.
Yeah.
And he could go to either side so smooth. And, that's one of the things that really sets him apart, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Word is he was like a legit jerk though. Like you couldn't talk to his wife. Like he didn't like that.
Yeah. Lust in your eyes.
George Steele showed him what's up.
Yeah.
He also played second base for the Cardinals in their farm system, right?
I think he was. Yeah, I think at one point.
Shortstop. Okay.
Yeah.
Second base.
Was it the
I
Cardinals?
thought it was the Phillies.
I thought
Was
it
it
was the
Phillies?
Reds. He was in somebody's organization.
Yeah.
He played minor league
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah.
And his brother.
The Reds would have promoted him.
Yeah, the Reds would have taken him right now. His brother, of course, Lanny Poffo, the poet laureate.
Genius.
Yeah.
Remember that guy? He's not my
Oh,
pick.
yeah.
Threw the frisbees out.
Yeah. I just remember he was in one of those battle royals. It may have been the Royal Rumble, and he got tossed. And I said, "There's poetry in motion. I'll be here all week."
But
Hey, Jason.
great pick
do
there,
we-
Breeze. I mean,
Yeah.
Savage has got. I mean,
Yeah.
I was going to take him if someone else didn't. So it's an awesome pick.
Jason, do you know, like, because the thing that got me curious as I was kind of thinking about this a week, these 80s wrestlers, you know, that was kind of our heyday. And I was thinking about people like The Rock and some of the well-known guys here recently. And I started thinking back to these 80s guys and the money, like, what was the money like compared to today? And are a lot of those popular guys that were really big in the 80s, are they still, you know, making money from licensing? Are they, you know, living homeless down on the street? I mean, do you know anything about?
A lot of
Vince
them,
is making a lot of money.
Yeah, no question. I think it's just like any other sport. I mean, you'll see back in the day, they're making a lot of money for then. You look at it now, and it's not that much. I mean, compared to what guys are making now, because guys are making tons of money now. Now, not to say that the Four Horsemen and Rock and Roll Express weren't taking in big paychecks, because they absolutely were. It's based on the crowd, and you get big crowds, you're going to get a bigger payday. But, you know, a lot of it, like Ric Flair, I mean, he had some hard times financially. You know, it's probably because he's been married a bunch and divorced a bunch, and, you know, his medical bills, I'm sure. But, yeah, they were making a lot of money then. But again, it's all relative to what's now. I mean, think about it. Johnny Bench, for his career, made $3 million for his career. He's the greatest catcher of all time. And
Second greatest.
That's like Mackie Sasser doesn't count.
Gary Carter does.
And that, I mean, compared to today, that's the minimum, $3 million.
Yeah.
By the way, we have
That's your minimum.
is that right? 8 minutes left. Wow.
Speed it up.
Yeah, we'll pick up the pace here. So this one was tough for me because there are two guys that I really want to pick, and one I mentioned earlier was Dusty Rhodes, who was great on the mic, and again, a guy that could talk you into an arena. And when he got beat up by the Horsemen in a parking lot with a baseball bat tied to a truck, that's one of the greatest scenes in wrestling history. But I'm going to stay away from Dusty Rhodes. I'm still going to stick to my Mid-Atlantic and WCW ties, and I'm going to go with one of the guys who was responsible for tying Dusty up and beating him up with a ball bat, and that is the enforcer, Arn Anderson. Arn Anderson, he was the backbone for the Four Horsemen.
Four Horsemen.
He is the heart of the Four Horsemen, and any reincarnation of the Horsemen, which, you know, many of them were terrible late in the days. I mean, Paul Roma, come on. Mongo McMichael, give me a break. Those guys are not Horseman material. But he's a guy
Roma.
Again, you talk about guys that could work the stick. Arn Anderson was a genius on the microphone. And, you know, he was serious. And, you know, he had all these phrases that, you know, they talk about Anderson's working on one part of the body and working on the arm. He said, a coffee table's no good with three legs. And he says, my favorite Arn Anderson of all time, he says, if I tell you that a grasshopper can pull a freight train, hook it up.
Hook it up.
And then walk off. I mean, he was tremendous on the mic, great in the ring. I think underrated, really, as a wrestler in the ring. He was a tag team with Tully Blanchard and the Brainbusters when they went to the WWF. But he was the backbone of the Four Horsemen. And with that, I'm going to go with Arn Anderson as my next pick.
Yeah, love it. I just finished his autobiography like 2 days ago.
Yeah. I met him too, and he's just a super nice guy. And I've got that book. Was it the one Forever?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got that too. So.
All right, so I got two picks back to back. I'll go ahead and get the one out of the way because there's no way I'm letting this draft in without Dusty Rhodes getting taken. Like you said, tremendous on the mic, solid wrestler for a guy who didn't look like he should be any sort of an athlete at all.
Yeah.
The guys could go. I think out of a lot of the guys, his legacy is going to stand the test of time too. With like you look what's going on in WWE right now with how NXT is taking off. I mean, Dusty was huge, huge influence on all those guys from your Finn Balor's, your Sasha Bankses, on and on and on. Plus his son Cody. It's kind of taking on Dusty's vision. And when Cody left WWE, I mean, he is a big part of starting a new company, which I think is the best product out there right now in AEW. And Cody has a lot of Dusty's business senses, and he's doing it in memory of his father, and it's awesome. And like I said, you guys want to check back into wrestling, I think AEW is the way to go. For my last pick, every good hero needs a villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no denying, even though he's not one of my favorite people, Hulk Hogan was huge in the 80s. But the guy who helped make him huge was none other than Roddy Piper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe the most underrated guy when it comes to mic skills. I mean, you want to talk about some promos, check out some of this guy's stuff.
Yeah.
Plus, a really underrated wrestler. He made you hate him so much that you kind of forgot how good he was as a wrestler. And I use the line all the time, just about now I'm afraid I'm gonna mess it up now. I'm getting choked up thinking. What is it about the questions and answers? Somebody help me out here. Or just when you run out of questions, I change the answers or something like that. I can't remember, but it's probably a lot better than what I'm making it sound like.
I think you smashed a coconut on your head.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, another guy, much like we were talking about Nikita, hated Roddy Piper in 1984, but loved the guy and what he did for the business. And like I said, great villain. And you need a villain to make pro wrestling work.
Yeah.
Piper's Pit was amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, it really was. Great, and Sags kind of alluded to it, but when he smashed a coconut on Jimmy Superfly Snuka's head, come on, I mean that's something. We got a little more than 3 minutes left, and my last pick, go through it quick. He's a guy that it was a real gimmicky type dude, but for some reason I enjoyed it. Because he was a guy that everybody hated him, but he portrayed it like everybody loved him. And he would come out and he would say, "Thank you very much. You're a beautiful audience. I love each and every one of you." He's cool. He's cocky. He's bad. He's the honky tonk man. I love the honky tonk man. So he is going to be my last pick in the draft.
Yep.
And
I don't hate it.
If I may, Sags.
Please.
So we're down at Ripley Senior League ball field, and Sags is doing PA down there, and I'm in the press box. And we had just watched wrestling that morning, and Honky Tonk Man won the Intercontinental title. So in between innings, Sags on the mic says, "We'd like to congratulate the Honky Tonk Man for winning the Intercontinental title today." And people are like, "What?"
At a Little League baseball game.
Little League baseball, and he's making that announcement. So there you go, Honky Tonk Man. 2 minutes.
All right, you guys have taken a lot of the other ones that I would have considered taking. So with my last pick here, I'm going to pick a guy that when I was making my list that I completely forgot about, and then I saw his name and I was like, "Oh yeah, I hated that guy." So just for no other reason, just how much I really hated him, and I don't know why he made me so angry. But with my last pick, I'm going to go with $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase.
Love it.
Yeah, that's great. Every man's got a price.
Got a price.
And then that diabolical laugh, and that was always great.
Yeah.
All right, to get mine in, great wrestler, great work. Again, not super great on the mic, but probably involved in what is considered one of the greatest matches of all time, WrestleMania 3 with Randy Savage, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. That dude could work. I don't think he ever got the run he should have. I know he won the world title from Flair, but he just should have been way bigger, I think, than he was allowed to be. I guess Vince never really, gave him that ride. But Steamboat was
The man.
ridiculous.
He gave him a
Ridiculously
stupid
good.
costume, though. Didn't
Well,
he? I wasn't a fan of that.
well,
But
yeah. Again, Vince,
I know it's
Yeah.
Vince.
He
But WrestleMania 3, check it out if you haven't seen it.
it's a great match. Maybe the best Mr. Irrelevant pick in the history of any type of draft.
Less than a minute, probably less than 30 seconds now, but interesting to note that no one picked Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
Well,
When you think wrestling in the 80s, you think Hulk Hogan, but nobody picked him.
And real quick, the line is, just when you think you know the answers, I change the question.
Ah!
There you go.